Good morning. Today is Wednesday, October 13th. This is a meeting of the Streets, Traffic, and Refuse Committee meeting. The meeting is called to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Present.
Alderwoman Peel.
Here.
Chairwoman Tyus.
Present.
6 present, you have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Now our next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. I'd entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes of Wednesday, October 6, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Peel.
Aye.
Chairwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Aye vote.
Okay, by your vote, you sustain the motion to approve the minutes of Wednesday, October 6th. The next thing on our agenda is to go into immediate continuation of our discussion last week as we acquire into the city toll facilities operations. And we actually have back with us most of the people we had. We have two Mr. Hassans. Mr. Hassan, who is that other person? So I won't call him your name. You're muted. You need to unmute. I can't hear you. Unmute.
Okay. Sorry for that. Yeah. Marlon, will you introduce yourself?
I beg your pardon?
The other person is Mr. Marlon Pepe. He's an auditor with the internal audit section.
Mr. Can you spell his first name? You don't know?
Marlon. Marlon. The last name is Pepe.
P-E-P-E?
P-E-P-P-E-R.
Okay, Mr. Marlon Pepe.
Unmute yourself. Marlon, you need to unmute.
Mr. Bale, you need to mute yourself, okay, if you're gonna, all right. You brought him as a person who's going to be part of the discussion and testify about the audit that we're getting ready to go over, the payroll financial audit, right?
We brought him because he was part of the audit for the payroll.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. All right, then, Madam Clerk, could you write that person's name down so we can add them to the list of the people that are testifying?
So noted.
Okay, thank you. All righty. Let's add all my stuff in order and just put it out of order. Cannot stand that, okay. So we went over 2 of the audits. So the third audit that we have to go over, I want to make sure I got the right one in front of me, is the payroll distribution review, pay period ending January 30th, 2021. Is that correct, Mr. Hassan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we're going to have to swear everybody back in again who's going to testify. So if you don't mind, we will go through and do that right now so that we don't have to do it individually as people come up to testify. That way we'll have everybody on the record. We'll start with you, Mr. Fletcher. Did you say, I can't remember if you said you wanted to affirm or swear, so I need to ask you that again.
Affirm.
Okay, Mr. Fletcher, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the Streets Committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I affirm.
Thank you. Mr. Bale, do you affirm or do you swear?
Affirm.
Mr. Leonard Bell, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the Streets Committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I, Leonard E. Bell Jr., do affirm.
Thank you. Mr. Hassan.
Affirm.
Mr. Okay, you're getting ahead of me. Okay, Mr. Hassan, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the Streets Committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I affirm, ma'am.
Thank you. And Mr., I had your name written down here. Papel, is that correct?
Pepper.
I'm sorry, Mr., what is it?
Pepper.
Pepper, P-E-P-E-R?
P-E-P-P-E-R, yeah.
Oh, P-E-P-P-E-R. Okay, Mr. Hassan. All right, Mr. Pepper, Mr. Marlon Pepper, do you affirm or swear?
Affirm.
Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the Streets Committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, and so we're gonna just continue. Mr. Flakes, are you by yourself or do you have other people that are gonna testify?
Oh, we had the whole team like we did last week. Myself,
Okay.
Director, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Young, and Mr.
Let's
Estes.
get you all sworn in. That way we'll be finished with that part. We'll start with you because you got your face right here, okay? Mr. Flake, do you want to affirm or swear?
Affirm.
Mr. Flakes, Mr. Ken Flakes, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the Streets Committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, who's next?
I'm not.
I knew,
testifying
I knew
today.
street director. And said, is it Bethany? Say the name correctly so I have it right.
Bethany.
Bethany, okay.
Yeah, Bethany.
Ms. Bethany Williams, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the Street Committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Next. Mr. Jamie Wilson, do you affirm that the truth, that the testimony you're about to give before the Street Committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
Okay, you swear, all right. What swear words do you use now? Okay, and this is Mr.
Estepari.
Are you on our testimony list? You were left off. Say your name and spell it because you're not on the list and I want to make sure we have it on it.
Sure. E-S-T-O-P-A-R-E. Estepari.
E-S-T-O-P-A-R-E.
Correct.
And what's your first name?
Steve.
Steve, S-T-E-V-E.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Madam Clerk, did you get that so we can add them to the speakers list?
The spelling of the last name, E-S-T-O-P-A-R-E.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am, I got it.
Okay, where'd you go? Okay. Mr. Estefari, do you swear or affirm?
Affirm.
Mr. Estefari, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the Streets Committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Do we have everybody who's going to testify before the committee sworn in? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Young. You don't have the whole team. Mr. Ed Young, do you swear or affirm?
Affirm.
Mr. Young, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the Streets Committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I affirm.
Thank you. Okay, is that everybody? Okay, great. So we can get started. We had a long meeting last time after 5 hours with 45 minutes for a lunch break. It really was too long. I don't really like to go that long. You start to get diminishing returns. So we broke up. We didn't finish the last audit that was brought before us. We're going to finish that and only that. You all should have gotten a notice from me that I am requesting that we be able to hire a court stenographer, court reporter. So I did write a report, a resolution about that, which I will send to all of the team members of the street committee if I didn't already send it to you, because sometimes I can't remember if I sent stuff or not. But that's all we're going to do is cover this audit, and then we're going to be completed for the day. And hopefully by the time we come back, we'll have authority to hire a court reporter, because if any of this goes the way some of the people who want to come before us have said, then we might have to write a investigation report. It's always better to have things that are, when people give a testimony, if you have a stenographer, they can print it up. We can have them go over it, sign it, and then we will have a legal document. And it was my determination that that might be what we needed to have after speaking to some of the people who are scheduled to come before us. So we will get started with the payroll distribution review, pay period ending January 30th, 2021. Mr. Hassan, were you the main person that was doing this audit along with Mr. Pepper?
Mr. Pepe was the auditor in charge. I was the audit supervisor.
Okay, well, Mr. Pepper, you weren't here last time. So what I'd like you to do is just go over the procedure of what you did and what this actual audit was.
I actually did a payroll distribution of the auto toll lot and what that consists of.
You need to speak up a little bit so we can hear you.
I said what that consists of is anything associated with the payroll, you know, as far as time sheets, overtime, or any leave or absence that they may have or have taken. So our functionality is to see if they were doing things correctly according to the ordinance.
Okay, and can you tell me why you would be doing a payroll distribution audit? The reason behind that?
You said, why do we do it?
Why? Yes, did someone request it? Did in the investigation or in the other audits that you did, you thought that it might require that, or can you tell me why that was done?
It was done. It was a request.
Okay, it's per request.
It was a special request.
Okay. Okay, and so can you just kind of tell me, go through, what did this audit find? Just a synopsis before we get into the specifics.
Well, the audit find was, or the observation is what we call it, was an opportunity to comply with Administrative Regulations 134 and to improve internal controls over the payroll processing and the excess overtime costs incurred for paid holidays.
So you found that it was some excess overtime holiday pay, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so I did get a document this morning from Mr. Hassan regarding, I guess, this audit. Are you familiar with this document at all? It is dated Wednesday, March 10th, 2021.
Yes.
Okay. And the first one is, let's see, I'm trying to go through it because I just, so it starts on March 10th, not March 9th, I guess. And it basically asks the question about what happens if an employee works on a holiday. And it cites section 16D, paragraph 2 of the compensation ordinance, where when a city holiday falls on the employee's regularly scheduled day off, the employee shall be entitled to have compensatory time added to his or her balance in an amount proportional to the number of hours regularly scheduled in a day or shift. So that means instead of getting paid overtime, you get comp time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there any time you would be able to get paid overtime instead of comp time? Per this section 16D?
I guess it depends on how the holiday falls. And I think how we calculated was you can only receive so many comp time before it is allowed or get paid for overtime, as it is stated.
Okay, so first of all, though, you would, and according to the regs, the first thing would be comp time. If you did so much comp time, then it would go to overtime. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Okay. And was it your finding that the toll lot had followed these procedures? Or did they not follow the procedures?
Say that again.
Was it your finding that the people operating the toll lot had followed the section 16D as regards to overtime versus comp time?
They followed it, but it was overly excessive.
It was overly excessive of what, comp time or overtime?
How they calculated the time and how they calculated it was really over excessively.
So they improperly gave people too much time, be it comp time or overtime. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Okay.
Alderwoman Tyus, a point of clarity.
Yes, sir.
On the observation and when we talked with the personnel, because that department has rotating shifts, then this type of policy would come into effect in their hours worked. And specifically, the regulation states that if a person works on a day that is a holiday, they will get their regular pay, but they also are to receive 8 hours of compensatory time, and they are to be paid 4 hours of overtime. That is the policy that works in this situation where you have rotating shifts that also have shift differential pay provisions. And that's Mr. Pepper, when he says excessively, it means that they were paid straight in overtime as opposed to receiving 8 hours of compensatory time and only 4 hours of overtime pay, which is what should have been submitted to payroll for processing.
Okay. I always need to restate so I can make sure I understand. So the way it sits, because they are doing rotating shifts and they working all the time and work holidays and Saturdays and Sundays, and they also have different shifts, which is comes up for a shift differential. They get paid regular pay, 8 hours of comp time, and then 4 hours of overtime. Is that correct?
If they are the person scheduled to work on a day that is a holiday, yes.
Okay, so it's only for holidays. It's not for Sunday or Saturday.
No, the regular shift differential will come into play for that situation because people's shifts may rotate every 3 months, as they explained in the process. Where a department has rotating shifts, then the first provision that comes in that takes effect is a shift differential.
Okay.
The second provision that takes place where there is a rotating shift and the person is scheduled to work on a holiday, then that's when that policy of they will get their regular pay for that day, plus they will get 8 hours of compensatory time and then 4 hours paid out as overtime.
Okay.
So that's what Mr. Pepper, when he says excessive, that's his clarification that in lieu of doing 8 hours of compensatory time, it appears from the records that it was just submitted for 12 hours of overtime. Mr.
Okay.
Pepper, will you reconfirm that that's what you found?
Yeah, that's correct and that's true. And that's
Okay.
how we.
Okay, so shift differential covers second shift, third shift, Saturdays, Sundays. Is that correct?
Yes, it does. And more specifically, where a department has a rotating shift
Right,
schedule in place, then the shift differential provision does take effect.
right. Okay. And then because they have rotating shifts and because they have shift differential, and then because it can also fall that they work on a holiday, that's when the other regular pay, comp time, and 4 hours of overtime kick in.
Correct, per that provision developed by the Department of Personnel, yes.
Which is section 16D, paragraph 2.
Correct.
Okay. And so, and this is, I may be putting you on the spot. So, who was doing the bookkeeping or time keeping a timesheets as far as you understand at the toll lot?
Mr. Pepper, I'll defer that question to Mr. Pepper.
Oh, when I got there, Mr. Steve, he was doing the books at that present time since he joined the auto toll lot.
So Steve Estopari was doing the books?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and so just my own further clarification. So do you know if this was, how long this section 16D has been into effect? Can either of you answer that question? Hello?
Therefore, either of us.
Mr. Bell, do you know how long section 16D?
No, I
paragraph 2?
cannot confirm how long it has been in place, but I do know that it has been effective for quite some time. And it was in a place, it was effective during our scope period. But the actual date of implementation, I can look that up for you right now, Alderwoman, if you want that. Give me time to look.
I do, because sometimes I know that things change, and so people may not have been put on notice. So that's what I'm trying to see.
Okay, let me look that up for you, and I will come back in. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so while he's doing that, so who did you speak to, Mr. Pepper, when you were doing your audit? Did you speak to Steve, Mr. Estefan? Did you speak with him about how payroll was done?
Yes, it was the main person of contact.
Okay.
He explained, you know, when he got there and how he was doing the payroll process.
Was there anybody else that you spoke to regarding the payroll process?
Mr. Young, he came in on a few occasions. He kind of explained a little bit of it too.
Were there any females that you spoke to regarding this process?
No.
Okay, and how long of a period did the audit cover? How many, was it days, weeks, hours? I mean, how long did it take you to do the audit is what I'm asking.
Because it was, because of the nature of the audit and the special review of the audit, it took probably about 3 weeks.
3 weeks, okay. I see Mr. Bell is back. Did you find out about the section 16? I can't hear you.
Personnel, yes, Alderwoman, they have just updated this policy as of August the 23rd, 2021. So I'm going back to our work papers to see what was the effective date at that time. Please give me additional time, please.
Oh, sure. And I want to tell people, when I do this, I'm telling you, I can't hear you, okay? So if you can't hear me, that means I can't hear you, okay? All right, thank you, Mr. Bell. Okay, so, but it is when you spoke with Mr. Esteban, Mr. Pepper, was it your understanding that he knew about section 16D paragraph 2?
Not quite sure if he knew about that section. We really didn't cover that at that time.
So your audit doesn't cover if you know about it. Your audit covers that it is a procedure, it is a reg implemented by the personnel department, and therefore it is incumbent upon each department who's doing payroll to have someone who understands and knows how to implement that particular regulation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so your project covered from when to when? Because I see it said pay period ending January 30th, 2021. But what period did it cover?
That is the first period of the new year.
So did it cover, what I'm saying, was it like from just January 1st to January 30th, or was it for a longer period?
No, it's just the 2 weeks prior, the pay period.
So if the pay period ended the 30th, it would have been from January 15th?
Correct.
And is it usual if you do a payroll distribution that you just do that short amount of period? Can you tell me why you didn't go back and look at like December or November?
Well, normally when we do payroll distribution, it's normally the pay period, the current pay period.
And
So
is that because it gives you an idea of how they have been doing it in the past? So is that why you don't go back and look at what they were doing, because you already get an idea just by doing
Yes.
it for the past pay period?
Yes, unless, we find, something out of the ordinary, then we can request additional information or additional pay periods.
Okay, and so let's then, Mr. Bell, are you back yet? Are you still? Are you still doing research?
Yeah, well, what I do know, this is actually part of the compensation ordinance. So this would be the ordinance that was in effect for that actual period of time.
Do you know, can you cite that compensation ordinance for me?
No, I can. Okay, let me get that number for you.
Okay,
And,
so it would have been the compensation ordinance that was in effect as of January 30th, 2021. So our most recent pay ordinance.
Yes, your most
You
recent.
don't have to
pay
go
ordinance.
and look it up. I can find that pretty easy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, because that's been in effect at least for a year, I think, the last time it was passed. So I just want to go over, so on March 19th, Mr. Bell and Mr. Fletcher, you signed off on a letter to then Street Director Jamie Wilson regarding the payroll distribution of Auto Towing and Storage Division, project number 2021-PD13. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And as I understand, the objective of the review was to make sure that only eligible employees received wages. Wages and receipts were adequately safeguarded. Employees were paid for actual hours worked or approved paid leave, and accrual and use of paid leave was accurate. Is that what the
Yes, that is.
Audit
Yes,
was?
yes, that is our standard objectives for a payroll distribution.
Okay, and so I see here that you said, you noted that the employees' biweekly timesheet leave request forms were not in compliance with the standard of payroll regulations, policies, and procedures. Is that correct?
Yes, and I'll defer the answers to those observations to Mr. Pepper.
Okay. And so again, Mr. Pepper, this was because you went through, did you go through multiple employees records or all employee records? How many employees did you go through?
I went through all employees within that pay period.
So all employees for the total lot within that pay period, within the 2-week pay period.
Correct.
And was it your finding that most, if not all of the employees did not comply. Their timesheets and requests for leaves were not in compliance with the regs or rules.
Correct.
Was this the first time that you know of that you had done a special payroll audit of the tow lot?
That's correct.
Okay, so let's just go to page 3 of the actual audit. So you give high, medium, and low risk analysis to when you're making observations, correct?
Correct.
And so so I'm looking at number 1, opportunity to comply with administrative reg number 134 and improve internal control over payroll processing. Could you go over to me what your recommendations were?
Recommendations is that you ensure.
I'm sorry, that first, what you noted first. What did you note first?
What did I notice when I first did this?
What did you write up at the bottom of page 3? Internal audit reviewed the payroll ending 1/30/21 and noted the follow. What were the things that you noted?
That when they signed their leave form, some of them was incompletely done, improper signature, because the supervisor is supposed to sign off on those, or the person in charge.
So the supervisor wasn't signing off on everybody's timesheet?
No.
Okay.
Some employees had signed timesheets, some didn't. When you turn in a leave or request form, it must be signed and dated. And there was a few that was not signed and dated.
Okay. Did everybody have the proper forms there? So if they actually took a leave or got, even though I know you said that they improperly got paid straight overtime versus leave, did everybody have their paperwork turned in?
The paperwork's turned in, but you have to fill out the forms correctly.
I understand that. But sometimes people don't even turn in paperwork, okay? Okay, and so then you gave an analysis of the percentage here of what percentage of each of the employees had done what. Could you go over that a little bit with me? It's at the bottom of page 3.
So the bottom of page 3, in the review of timesheets and leave request forms, what was observed was 74%, which is 14 out of 19 timesheets was not signed by a supervisor. 85%, which is 16 out of 19 leave forms, was not signed by a supervisor.
Okay. Oh, my printout is so I'm sorry, I'm missing a page, maybe, or maybe I'm not. What's the 4th page?
The 4th page, it's got daily attendance records. It starts at the top, daily attendance records.
Okay, yes, that is the 4th page. I don't see a page 4 any place that printed, but okay. So, so is this a continuation of your observations?
Yes, it's all under one. So it is a continuation after the percentages.
So what else? Let's go over the daily attendance records and what did you find? What were your findings or observations there?
So the daily attendance record was incomplete based on the following documents of the daily beginning and ending times for each period of work, meals period, number of hours worked each work day, the total of hours in a work week, explaining the difference between the times entered on the attendance form, time to be paid, including approval, paid leave, any unpaid time off, employees' initial assign, attesting the accuracy of the records, which means that, as I stated before, when you sign your time sheet or you sign the leave form, you must sign and date it. And there was a few, based on the testing that we've done, that was not signed and dated or approved by the supervisor.
Okay, so based on your observation, you determined that the payroll process of the auto towing and storage division did not comply with the City of St. Louis Personnel Administrative Reg number 134, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Then you also gave some, you noted what not following these regs might lead to. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what is it that you said could happen as a consequence of not following the correct procedures?
Well, once we give observation, we always give recommendations to how to improve.
Okay, but before that, you talked about what could happen if it wasn't done correctly.
Yes, the inadequacy review of employees' payroll records
Okay,
may lead to ineffective controls over a payroll process, additional time to correct payroll error. Employees may be paid for hours not worked. See observation number 2, which we talked about previously, and unreliable data for payroll costs.
okay. And so then you made recommendations.
Yes.
And what were they?
And we recommended to the auto, the towing and storage division to ensure the accuracy, adequate supervisory review and approval of employees' biweekly timesheets, vacation, medical leave request forms. That the auto tow management should ensure that employees are familiar with the payroll process and that the biweekly timesheets, vacation, medical leave request form are correctly by authorization and approval, and that the auto tow management should delegate or assign the review responsibilities of payroll documents before they are sent to the city's payroll section for processing.
Okay. And so when you do a audit like this, are they required to sign off? Or is like when you talked to Mr. Estevan, was he required to sign off on your recommendations, or was it just something that you present to the department when you're finished with it?
Once we are complete, we have what's called an exit conference. An exit conference, we get together, myself, my supervisor and manager, along with appointed authorities over at the street department, and I let them know what I find. And then it's up to them to agree or disagree about the findings. And they noted to agree, with the findings, and they agreed to going forward to maintain proper and adequate documentation.
Okay, and so is this conference, is this page 5 a result of the conference, the management's response?
Yes.
Okay. So I see here it says the management agrees with the observation that adequate survey review and approval of time cards and leave requests will be completed by an administrative assistant too.
Correct.
Okay, and I guess was administrative assistant number 2, was that Mr. Estepar? Is he the one that does it?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So before that, it could have been done by other people other than him.
Correct.
And they agreed to limit it to only him, or whoever
Correct.
was that administrative assistant too.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the next really I see, and that was like and I don't know, because I don't have a color copy. I don't know if the excessive overtime cost incurred for paid holiday was deemed high or low.
It was high,
Okay,
should have been red.
it was red. Okay, what is low? What color is low?
Low would be a green,
And yellow is medium?
yes,
So opportunity to comply was also a red high risk, right? The opportunity to comply with administrative regs, was that a red high risk?
that's correct.
Okay. So we kind of went over this already, as I can understand it, right? About the shift differential and not paying people. But specifically, it says that we had an overpayment of overtime to employees in the amount of $5,149.58. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so what happens when we overpay and pay employees? Do we go back and recoup that expense, or what happens when something like that happens?
Not sure. Maybe Mr. Hassan can. Or Mr.
Point of
Bell can
clarity,
answer.
Alderwoman Tyus.
I don't see your face, Mr. Bell.
I'm sorry. I do apologize.
Okay,
Point of clarity with that. That would, at that time, once we do make an observation of such, the governing departments, whether it be payroll and payroll working with them, should determine how to recoup that pay. But I think in this observation, the department did not agree with us on the application of the ordinance and the processing of the payroll according to the provisions in the ordinance. But in general cases where a person has been overpaid, it is procedure to go back and recoup that pay. But I guess in conjecture, you may run into a challenge if it was not their error. It was the error of someone else. So that's a gray area for us, which we do not get involved in that point of saying who's liable at this point.
so how could it not be the department's error if you're doing your own timesheets? How is that gray area?
No, I say the employee may present the case. Is it my error or is it the department's error? And why should I incur an additional loss for an error that was not made by me?
Is it an additional loss if I got paid too much money? If the bank puts too much money in my account and they find out later that they put too much money in my account, they take that money back out of my account. Is that not correct?
Well, that's correct, but you're an attorney, but now we run into the issue of liability. We're on the issue of who's really at fault here. Is it me, the account holder, or me, the bank?
So you're saying that in the city's laws and ordinance and regs, there is a gray area that if an employee gets paid too much money, how we recoup that expense?
I cannot confirm that we could find something that would tell us how we could go back and recoup that pay. If we could have found it, we would have put it in our audit report. But we had no documentation, no regulation, no ordinance which we could stand upon to say this is what needs to take place now that this has been discovered.
Okay, and so, and I could see if this was, a year, 2 years later, you basically did this audit and then turned it in within a few months. That's correct?
Yeah, that is correct. The payroll distribution, as Mr. Pepper says, does cover a certain payroll period. And when we see that type of systematic misapplication of a procedure, we can go back and project it over, however many payroll periods, and project how much excess cost the city or someone has incurred or lost due to a consistent misapplication of a procedure.
Okay, so, but even though it's consistent, because if we take it from the budget of the tow lot, then we're really just taking from one hand and putting it in the other. So the only way we would actually be able to recoup is to get it from the employees. Is that correct?
Technically, yes. I was responding with that, was saying technically, yes.
Well, tell me what the
Subject to-
technicality is, because I'm trying to understand.
Well, because I'm still gonna let back to the liability issue of it. Who is really liable? And so I think that's where any employee would kind of present that as a defense for
Their
you coming
defense would
back
be-
and shortchanging them.
Their defense, well, you're not shortchanging them, because their defense would be that the payroll clerk knew or should have known that
Correct.
what the rules and regs are as how to pay me. That I
Correct.
do not do the payroll, and therefore you paid me for overtime when I should have been paid so many hours of comp time, and therefore I'm not liable for getting too much money. Is that what you would say their defense would be?
That I think that is a plausible response I would expect to hear from an employee.
And so couldn't I just make that same argument with the bank and say, I did not put that extra money in my account, you did. And so since I didn't put it in my account, I should be able to spend it. And in fact, maybe I have already spent it. So why are you now holding me liable for that money?
I think they have similarities. The two scenarios have certain similarities. However, the liability issue would come in. And I think if they really presented a good liability response, the bank would have to eat that cost themselves.
Well, I can tell you the bank does not. They in fact prosecute you if you spend the money that does not belong in your account. Okay, you might think that's a plausible defense, but it is, you knew you didn't, the bank will tell you, you knew you did not put that money in there and that it is not your money. And then they will prosecute if it's a big amount. They will at first give you an opportunity to put the money back. But there are known famous people in the city of St. Louis who have been prosecuted because of that. So I don't know how plausible that defense is, but have you, when you're doing these audits, do you ever seek further legal clarification about an issue like that?
At the present time, no, we did not. We did not see that in this case to take it further to get a legal opinion onto how to recoup that. Once we notify the people of this condition, in reference to cost, what you're really getting to is cost recovery. And that is something that we do not get involved in with cost recovery, nor are we authorized per the charter as an audit function to involve ourselves in the cost recovery phase of any cost that we see that is due back to the city.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So I'll ask further when I get to the street department. So as you said, they, as I understand, they disagreed with, does not agree with the observation. So can a manager just say, which I'm looking here, we disagree? And then what happens when that happens, when they just disagree?
Well, if they have a right to disagree, but we do ask if they can provide any collaborative supporting information to state why they disagree. And I think when I looked at the response, and if you look at my auditor comment, it appears that it came across as if it's their discretion to determine who qualifies for overtime, inconsequential to what the ordinance says. And it was my response to them that the right to assign overtime is not at the discretion of appointing authority when you have an ordinance that outlines how a person is to be paid on a day that is a holiday and when they are working that holiday, and it is a department that has rotating shifts. So the criteria was very definitive very clear on how we are to compute payroll costs in those situations.
So there's no gray area, it's black and white,
No,
A, B, C, D.
absolutely, Alderwoman Tyus, I stand behind the audit report. I stand behind it and I stand with it. There is no gray area with regard to that compensation ordinance section on how overtime and compensatory time is supposed to be determined when there is differential shifts, rotating shifts, and an employee works on a holiday, when they are scheduled to work on a day that is a holiday.
Okay. And so just further following my line of questioning, so what happens if you know, if a department fails or refuses to follow your guideline or recommendations, what happens?
Well, I think as Mr. Fletcher stated in the last hearing, we do schedule follow-ups on audits, and then we will come back and see if the department what's their status of recommendations that we did in that report. If we find that they have not complied or have not tried to do any resolution of the observation and the following recommendations, and where there is substantial cost to the city that is being incurred, then at that point, we will go through the process in the comptroller's office to discuss how do we handle this per the process that's at B, which means that would call for a meeting with the upper management of the comptrollers, who at that time would determine how to address this matter from a fiscal point of view.
Okay, and so can you give me examples of how it might be addressed?
Well, I can give you an example, but I cannot tell you that is the definite within itself process.
I understand.
Okay.
Because I understand that you are the audit. You know, people often get older people confused with the executive branch. So when the trash doesn't get picked up, they call us and think that, and I try to explain to them, we make laws, but we're not the enforcer of laws, and they don't care. They want something done. So I do understand. So
and I'm glad you said it that way, because we are not within our right to audit. We do not have the authority to make anyone comply.
Right.
So at that point where there is a serious violation or something that is not compliant with an existing written policy, then at that point I'll say what we would do internally. We will first discuss with our fiscal operations support manager. At that time, we will call in, if to go further, we will discuss with the legal advisor and the comptroller at that time, or her designee, which will determine what would be the appropriate fiscal response in this situation. And just to give you an historical point of view, I think some years ago, there was a fiscal crisis in the Department of Health with regard to processing of vouchers. And because there was such a potential amount of federal funds to be lost, the comptroller declared it an emergency fiscal matter and went in and got all the invoices processed so they could properly get reimbursed of the federal monies that were due.
Right. So, but in this case, that wouldn't be the case. So this is somebody, let's just say this is a division that's just flat out said, I'm not going to do it. Would one of the things that you would do, since the mayor appoints all directors, does a copy of this audit, is a copy of the audit sent to the mayor's office?
In this situation, if that we would send a copy of the audit to the mayor's office, and we have provided a copy of this audit to the mayor's office. If in our follow-up, and let me provide a little bit more clarity, if in our follow-up we found that there was no compliance with the original observation, then most likely because of the potential incremental costs being incurred, we most likely would also then at that point discuss with the mayor's office.
Okay, so in this
let me clarify that. Per the approval of the comptroller and the comptroller.
So in this particular audit, this was not Mayor Jones, this was Mayor Cruzen, correct?
At that point, yes.
And some of the other audits that were, I think they covered both Mayor Cruzen and Mayor Slay, if I'm recalling. And so would both of them would they have been given copies of the audit?
I can only speak to the ones that were under my jurisdiction, which was the ones in 2021. Yes, they would have been provided, which we did provide copies to.
Okay, so then they would have been to Cruzen. I thought I saw one that was older, so maybe my memory fails me. Okay, so at least we know that Mayor Cruzen would have been provided with the ones that were under your supervision.
Yes, given the materiality of the observation, yes.
Is the president of the board or members of the board of aldermen provided copies of such?
No,
audit?
not on a normal basis. We do not have a distribution list that include all the board of aldermen, alderwomen, and the mayor. We will send it to basically who is directly related to that specific department. However, all of our reports are publicized on our website.
Are you prohibited? So I'm going to go coming from a different way. Are you prohibited from sending it to the president of the board of aldermen, who is a member of E&A?
No, at the present time, we have no policy that prohibits us from providing a copy of any report, because all of our reports are subject to the Freedom of Information Act.
I understand what you're saying, but since the comptroller is in charge of this, so she's getting a copy. And since the mayor is going to get a copy because the mayor appoints the directors, and so maybe if the director is refusing to do what needs to be done, then the mayor is the person in charge of discipline and ordering the directors to do their jobs, I would think. So just to me, in keeping with not who the particular president of the board is, but because they all three are equal members of the Board of E&A, it would seem to me, if you did not give it to all of the Board of Aldermen, my suggestion would be that you at least copy the president of the Board of Aldermen.
Well, with that being said, Alderwoman Ties, we can take under advisement, and given that if we receive a request from the Board of Aldermen or the President of Aldermen asking to be copied and provided a copy of every report that we do, effective as of today, we will certainly comply with that request.
But you want him to actually, the office to actually ask for you to do it, not that you could just do it. Because I'm requesting that you
but I would like something going along with your protocol.
Okay.
I would like something in writing saying that we would like to receive copies of all audits that are performed by the internal audit section.
Okay. I will send that along to the president's office, because then they can make a determination of sharing it with the aldermen, because you say that they're all, of course, listed on the comptroller's office, but when you put your head down and you're busy doing other things, you don't necessarily go looking to see, well, when did the internal auditors do an audit? Whereas, especially if you had sent this to me, and I haven't been the chair that long, but the former chair, Alderman Boyd of the 22nd Ward, he was the chair for the last couple of years. So maybe he would have liked to known about these audits and what was going on. And perhaps if you send it over at least to the president, if not, because now these things would all be digital, as I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah, they are digital. They are on the website as digital, and we could provide it. We do provide them now by way of digital in a PDF format. And I just want to go back to a point of
Wait a
clarity.
minute, so let me finish my point
Okay.
being that, so it's not that hard for you, even if not just the president, but if you provided all the members with your internal audits, because at some point, especially our standing committees, we are more than likely going to have an oversight committee on whatever you're doing audits on, okay? Or we're going to have to do votes on money that might have to go there, or rules, or even the personnel regs and rules, and or maybe how we might be suggesting how to improve things. So if we don't know this, and I'm just saying, I have not, I've been here, I got elected 30 years ago, but I have not kept my eye on what the internal audit has done. I only really kind of noticed that when somebody sent me something and said, hey, did you see that? Or we read it in the press. But And I realized, and I maybe would have been opposed years ago when everything was paper. But now that things are digital, I'm saying that that's the kind of information I would have liked to know. Okay. And so I will request that the president say something, but I might just request that I be placed on that list myself, just because, especially if I see something about audit of something that's under the streets committee, which would be towing. And I know you guys are doing another audit of the streets committee. As the chair of that committee, I would like to know what the outcome is. Does that make sense to you?
That is, and I will duly note that as of this meeting.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, you were going to add something else.
I just want to add a point of clarity. You stated earlier as to if we find a department is not complying, once we do a follow-up, and we really would determine if they have not complied with the recommendation once we perform a follow-up at that point. But just because they say they disagree does not mean that they're not complying. We would have to come back and really attest and confirm that they have complied or not complied with the observation. If we find out that they have not complied and there's incremental costs being incurred by the city, then we would follow the process of determining what is the overall total impact to the city financially, and then how do we address this through the city regulations and procedures.
And so in this case, they said they disagree. We got black letter law, which says they're wrong. How long do you wait to do a follow-up?
We actually do a follow-up basically within the next fiscal year. We will plan a follow-up on a report.
So you give them a whole year to, because if I'm saying you're wrong and I have a right to determine how I pay my employees, even though it doesn't follow the rules and regulations, you give them another year to continue to not follow the rules and regulations? Is that what I mean?
Well, let me clarify that as well, because we also have an audit plan that we are covering. We have to cover our audit plan that we already have in place.
Yes, sir.
And so if we would just take one and shift it to the side, of course, there are high risk areas that will require special attention, but we move on to number one, the priority of completing the audit plan. And when we do our annual risk assessment again, that would come under our risk assessment to say that we need to do a follow-up on this audit to see where they are, or if we are incurring any more incremental cost.
So, but just let's look at this. So we said we lost like $5,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you wait an entire year, and that was just for 1 month, or was it 2 weeks pay period?
That was in a 2-week pay period. A distribution just covers a certain payroll period.
So then just let's say, and if we lose 5,000 every 2 weeks, so we're talking about 26 weeks, right?
Right.
So if they just continue to do what they're talking about, we're talking about $130,000 we could potentially, just using that number, lose while you're waiting for a follow-up audit. Is there anything that would trigger you to do the audit faster?
If we had another special request that asks us to go back in and see where they are with this, and once again, as I state, and I think as you said, we have no authority to enforce compliance with the observation or the regulation. We can only at this point, on the risk of the situation, discuss it with the proper authorities. And when I say authorities, elected, and they could decide what would be the proper recourse in that time. But we, as the internal audit function, has no charter authority to enforce compliance with a regulation.
So only if there is a special request, or is there a dollar amount that would say, and I'm going to go back to alert, Will Smith. So back from my days from watching TV, is there something that would make you say, uh-oh, this is a big amount and we need to do another audit pretty soon?
Yeah, that could be plausible. And I want to clarify is that when we received the special request for the review of the audit, total audit, when I looked at the general information, I ordered the review of the payroll distribution as well. Because when I looked at the conditions that were being reported to us, I said, this has to have some associated payroll costs with it too. So that's why I did, as the audit manager, call for a payroll distribution review of the auto tow lot at that time.
So if Danger Will Smith, instead of $5,000, it was $25,000 we were losing every 2 weeks. And they said, nope, we think you're wrong and we don't have to follow this. Then would that be some kind of threshold that you would say, we'll come back in 4 weeks, 6 weeks and see if you clean this up? Because sometimes people say you're wrong, but they do know you're right. So they do clean up and start doing it the correct way.
Okay. In that case, let me speak from a risk assessment approach and also govern myself within the established procedures. If it was a known of that amount that it was $25,000 in one payroll period, that is above a tolerable threshold.
Okay.
So at that point, I would, as the audit manager, call to meet with my upper management to discuss what is the recommended approach and who are the people we should invite to the table to inform them of this is what we are going to do. Do we need at this point to change this to what we would call a 100% review of the process as opposed to a just periodic random sample review?
So you would call it a 100% review of the payroll? Is that what it would be then?
If in this scenario, if in this scenario, we discovered that just in that one payroll period, it was $25,000, then that's a high incremental threshold. And I will present the case to turn it from a sample review to a 100% review.
And would it be of just the payroll or the whole tow lot?
No, the 100% review regarding where the cost was discovered would cover that process, which has that associated loss of resources with it.
So in this case, it would be the payroll.
It would be the payroll. We
Okay.
would come in and do a 100% review.
Okay, because what we did before was a sample.
That is correct. Just within that payroll period, we would consider that a sample.
And so you used a magic word, tolerable threshold.
Yes. I opened myself up. Yes.
You used it, not me, your words, correct?
That is correct.
Do you have a certain amount that is a tolerable threshold and that which is not?
We do not have it. We look at, let me say this. We look at, number one, the type of process, what's the associated cost with it. We do have within our industry guidelines to determine what is tolerable or not tolerable. With regard to the internal audit section, we do not have a table that tells us 2,000 is acceptable, 5,000 is not acceptable. No, we don't have a table of thresholds within our department, but we do within our industry guidelines tells us what is tolerable and what is not tolerable.
And can you further flush that out? Is it a case?
So in other words, basically in our industry, the $5,000 that we discovered in this one payroll period was in that one payroll period. It is a risk, but given at this point, we would not further investigate it because of the way we are structured governmentally. We have no authority to enforce compliance. Okay. So once we identify the regulation and the concern and the observation, our only approach would be to do a follow-up to see what has been done regarding it. And I think I'm gonna digress because I see Mr. Fletcher wants to provide a little bit more clarity.
So you want to yield? Go ahead, Mr. Fletcher. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman Tice. Let me make sure I'm on mute. I am. I just wanted to say that in addition to what Leonard said, this $5,000 is not an actual $5,000 in the sense that the city lost exactly the $5,000 because we have to keep in mind that they were actually due comp time
Comp
for that,
time.
which
So
is the
that would have
same
to be
amount of money.
subtracted out of that.
Yeah, yeah. So in materiality, when he uses the words he was using, as far as I would use the word materiality, and because the entire chain all the way up through the mayor's office was provided this report, as well as it's available online. It will be put in our next audit plan to do a follow-up. Our follow-ups, when he also says, just to clarify, that the next fiscal year, that doesn't mean that we're going to wait a year. That just means that the next fiscal year it will be put in the plan, and we may get to it the first month of the plan.
So you may come, so this was done, you might say July 1st or August 1st, you might get to it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
a
we
different
may,
fiscal year.
yeah, yeah. So and I can say that we typically don't do a follow-up within 3 to 6 months, because we have to keep in mind that audits, we have to always look at the other side too. They really are short-staffed. I mean, I'm not talking about streets in general, I'm talking about everybody.
Oh, I
And
know.
so, you know, for us to
This is
perform
my
an audit,
sixth mayor, so I do know exactly what has happened. If nobody else understands, I
right,
understand what has happened to our employee base.
right.
Okay.
So for us, we know that it is a burden for us to come in. And they really do, and I'm talking all offices, they really do accommodate us well. So for us to take up 3-4 weeks of their time, and then to come in just a few weeks later would have to be, and since I've been here, we haven't had one, would have to be just an egregious, but that's hypothetical, but we haven't had that. So, it doesn't necessarily take a year to do a follow-up. In fact, it's probably more like in between 3 and 6 months, I'd say somewhere in that range, but it is the next fiscal year, as Leonard said.
So, but even just saying, and I understand what you say about that wasn't an actual $5,000, because we do have to say that they would have got comp time, which is also, somebody would have had to cover that. So that would have also been an expense. I actually have a minor in accounting besides everything else. Okay. But is that, when you find things like that, is that an indication that they may have been doing this all along? So in not only going forward, but let's just say looking back, that this has been occurring.
Yeah, actually, if you look at the report, I think Leonard and his group actually projected more than 5,000 because the consistency that this was happening. I think he projected over $50,000 of paid leave when it should have been compensatory leave. So, yeah, we do consider that. Yes.
Okay. And I understand that you are under certain restrictions, but could the comptroller herself said, hey, I want you to go back in here and do X, Y, Z, or is she also, as you understand it, restricted from how an audit is done?
Well, to be clear, we can get special requests from anybody. Any director or alder person can give us a special request, and we will perform the special request. We are an independent agency of the city, under the administrative direction of the comptroller, but the comptroller has made it very clear all the years I've been here that we are independent even from the comptroller.
How long have you been here?
About 3.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so even under the direction of the comptroller makes it very clear that she will never and has never gotten in our way, even in our audits of the comptroller's office herself.
Okay.
So we even audit her in the comptroller's office. So yeah, anybody can ask for that. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. So what happens, how does it happen that the auditor from the state of Missouri comes in? Since we have this office here, what happens if they step in?
How they got here, I think it was a request of the city or maybe the board of, I have no idea how the city auditors or the state auditors.
Auditor woman.
Wait a minute, hold on just a minute. So do you understand, or do you know that if say you've done an audit and then you look up and the state auditor is also doing an audit, do they follow from where you have done your audit, or do they pick up and do their own audit, or do you know it all?
Right. No, actually, I do know that. And actually, Leonard has been collaborating with the state auditor because they do actually pick up where we left off. And so Leonard can provide some more clarity on that. But we have provided documentation and work papers of what we have found so they can substantiate it and then go past that. So Leonard can.
For clarity on that.
Mr. Bell, so you can jump right in when I tell you can, okay? I love this because I can't tell my husband this, so this is my chance to be in charge. Mr. Bell, go ahead.
Yes, for point of clarity on that, the state auditors, when you say they come in, a lot of times they come in either there's a referendum from the taxpayers that they get enough signatures to request an audit. But when they do come in, they do look and see what audits we have performed. And then they come in and meet with us to look at the audit report to see what it covers. And that determines what procedures they do not have to do or what supplementary procedures. So they want to kind of reinvent the wheel. And we have worked with them on our reviews of the health department, of our reviews on the airport with regard to their parking operations, their overall contract administration process, as well as just recently dealing with the auto toll lot operations. The state auditors have met with us and asked us for our information on our audit coverage. And I just wanted to clarify, when you mentioned restrictions upon the comptroller, I just want to clarify that in the performance of an audit and the authority to the audit, there are no restrictions. The only restriction we have is with the authority to enforce the compliance with the observation.
Okay, now, but just a little bit further, and then I'm going to get off of this topic. So do you have the authority to request that the state auditor come in? And does the state auditor have more power in their auditing than you do? Or do you know?
Okay, first things, at the present time, I do not know of any regulation that we can request the state auditor to come in. And second one, per our regulations, no, the state auditor does not have more authority than we have with regard to the right to audit departments. Only in the case, I would say, where there are state funds that have been provided to the city and they're coming in within that jurisdiction to audit compliance with those state funds.
Okay, so by that same token, could federal auditors come in here and audit if it's federal funds?
They do have that right with us being a subrecipient of any federal funds. They can come and audit, but I do know they will look at and see what audits we have performed to ensure audit coverage. And also as part of the A133, which is the official audit process for federal government, federal funded programs, they do have a process to look at what type of monitoring is that local government doing for those federal funds, which we do have a process in place for that as well.
Okay. I just want to stop for, I'll get through this and then I'm going to see if the committee has any questions. So after the management said they disagreed, you further commented that it is not the appointing authority. The audit manager's comments were that it was not the appointing authority's discretion to determine and compute overtime in a method that is in contrast to the City of St. Louis administrative regs, including annual pay ordinance. Is that correct?
Yes, that was when I looked at the response, that was my conclusion.
Okay. And you went on and you had a kind of lengthy response about the holiday pay and the process in the holiday pay, and you got into it exacting of what should happen. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the reason why I did that is to provide full disclosure, because we, as part of our process, we really wanted to first understand what is the proper process in this environment where you have rotating shifts and you have shift differentials. So we were, for lack of a better word, we were assured and confident that we had vetted the existing St. Louis Department of Personnel procedures regarding this process, and we were confirmed that our opinion and our position was very well supported.
Okay. Okay, and then so after that, that's during your conference, then you guys finish, they've replied, you reply back, and then you just terminate your audit and give various people copies of your audit. Is that what happened?
That is the way our process works, yes.
Okay, and I see in here you actually have some examples of actual payroll records to substantiate why you had findings that certain things were not correct. Is that right?
That is correct.
And so we also have a chart on page 10 that shows the overtime that was paid and that which you out, the allegations of what should have been paid.
That is correct.
Okay.
And for clarity, Alderwoman, we did not list the employee's name, but we labeled the employee A, B, C. These were actual employees' records that we reviewed. And when we looked at what was recomputed, what was computed per the ordinance guidelines, and then what was actually computed and submitted from the department, and what should have been allowable is also what's in compliance with the regulation and the ordinance. And then that's how we come up with the difference.
Okay, all right. And then, as you said, then you gave copies to the tow lot or the director of health. I mean, not health, director of streets, correct?
Yes, they were provided a digital copy of this report, inclusive of what their response was. Yes.
Okay, and then you gave a copy to the mayor's office?
That is correct.
And you retained a copy?
That's correct.
Is there anybody else that received a copy that you know of?
Not out of, except for the request that we have received from the state auditor. The news reporter requested a copy, and because of the Freedom of Information Act, we had no other choice but to provide that copy. Outside of that, we have had no other request.
Well, I kind of differ a little bit with you. We had no other choice. I embrace transparency, so good. If we're not doing anything, we want the news people to read and see what we're doing. That's a way for the people that we represent make sure that we are looking out for their best financial interests and their best interests in general. So although I'm not one that calls the press a lot, the press calls me, and I usually do not refuse any such thing because I'm pretty open and transparent, probably more so than people would want. So I don't mind the press. And the one question I have, since you say that is on your online on your site, could you just refer the press to that site, or do you have to actually mail over and or send over hard copies?
No, we don't. Through our public information officer, he will refer them to the site. And if there's someone that's waiting, if they know we're doing an audit and they're waiting for us to publish the audit, he will notify them when the audit is published and where they can go and get a copy of it.
Okay, well then that's open and transparent. That's good.
Yeah.
We didn't have such things when I got here in 91. So it's a lot better in 2021, okay?
Okay.
Okay, is there anything that I missed before I go to the the streets department in relations to this audit, this final audit?
Alderwoman, not that I can recall at this time.
Mr. Hassan, Mr. Fletcher, or?
Not at this time.
Okay.
If I may add, our position on the interpretation of the ordinance was supported by the personnel department. And that's why I sent a copy to you this morning to confirm our position on the interpretation of the ordinance, the competition ordinance.
Right, it was confirmed by personnel, right?
Yes.
That's what these emails are from. And
Yes.
I did provide this. This is also placed on our Google Docs for all our members. So I see that it's from Eric S. Bates, the Human Resource Specialist too, right?
Yes, ma'am. And it's also confirmed that the appointing authority does not have the power or the authority to act contrary to the compensation ordinance.
Okay. Okay, anything else from the
That's okay.
auditors?
True.
Mr. I'm looking for all these people. Mr. Pepper, anything else?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Fletcher
No, ma'am.
and Mr. Hassan,
I'm through. No more question.
Mr. Bell.
None, no.
Okay, all right then. Does any of the committee members that are still here, because I know this is long and drawn out, have any questions of the auditors?
Well, I do, but if you're going in order, Jeff, please add me.
Okay. Excuse me, I go in order of my vice chair, Mr. Bosley. Do you have any questions?
No, ma'am. Thank you so much. Not at this time.
Okay, then I go to seniority. Mr. Alderman and Mr. Vice Chair, Boyd, do you have any questions? Because I'm gonna always make sure I give you that title until I make up.
I don't want that title. I want vice president.
Oh, okay. That's it there. Because that's the vice president right here, Mr. Alderman Bosley. Okay.
No, he's the vice chair.
No, I'm giving him that. Okay, Mr. Vice President and Alderman Boyd.
Okay, I want to ask Mr. Hassan, is it your team's understanding that, I think his first name is Steve in the whole lot, clearly understood how to record the payroll properly so that people will be paid what they're supposed to be paid?
My understanding is that the department or the division head, the appointing authority, probably put in place somebody who understands how to handle payroll. So we expect them to put somebody in place to know how to handle the payroll, because we don't know how to define who's working for them.
You saying, I'm sorry, because your accent is so hard, it's a little difficult for me to catch all the words. So I think I heard you say you rely on appointing authority to know how to process the payroll. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, to put somebody who knows how to handle payroll in the division.
Okay. I guess it would be helpful if someone is doing payroll and you're doing an audit, that you know where their competency is as it relates to that. Sometimes in departments, you'll move somebody into that position, but they're not really trained for that position. So they're kind of doing the best that they can. And I'm not making an excuse for anybody, because we're going to hear from the street department, but I used to do audits when I was in the Army, when I audit units, and I did it when it came to supplies and inventories. And one of my tasks was to make sure that the person was properly trained to do that task. And if they were not, then part of my audit recommendation was to make sure that somebody is properly trained and up to date on all the current regulations, because sometimes people use the systems that are outdated because no one told them that there was a new policy in place. So I just want to kind of make that comment that would be helpful. I think that would be helpful as you guys do your audits, that you're clear on that. And I see Mr. Bell Jr. is raising his hand. Yes, sir.
Yes, for a point of clarity, in my discussions with the administrative assistant too, I did not find out that he was not knowledgeable of the process. I think there always was an opportunity for him to know about how do you apply the process of overtime and comp time on holidays. So I did not find him not to be knowledgeable. He did have some, what I would call, working knowledge of the payroll process.
Okay. Because I just want to make sure that, and I really appreciate our chair as she goes, she's been very thorough as she goes through all of this. I just want to make sure that there's nothing nefarious that happened during the course of these payrolls, and that if there's a need for improvement, that's the way we're moving. Because if there was something nefarious, then of course that would be a really big problem.
Well, just a point of clarity. No, I did not find the actual case of the observation to be an intentional case to defraud the city or anything. It just was the misapplication of the procedure.
Okay. All right. Okay. I just want to be clear with that. I mean, there's been a lot of good discussion going on. I'm learning quite a bit. So thank you for always clarifying. I like that.
Me too.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I have no further questions.
Okay, Alderman Vaccaro.
And I may have missed this because I got so much going on all at the same time, but I know the state did an audit of everything. Did we ever get the report on from the state audit on what they found? Anybody?
Wait, I think, are you directing it toward the The
Just
auditors,
anybody that could answer that. I'm just curious, what did the state auditor find?
well, let's let the auditors go first and then we'll let the street department. Mr. Bell, did you have an answer to that?
I think it was about 3 weeks ago, we just met with the state in regard to the auto tow review. So I don't think the state has made their final conclusions on their review of the auto tow operations.
Okay, yeah, I just was curious where that was at, because I haven't heard anything. That was
Well,
really
Mr. Flake had his hand up. Do you mind if he answers also, Alderman Vaccaro?
Oh, no, that'd be fine. That'd be great.
No, I was just gonna echo what Mr. Bell said. They've been there for about 18 months and they keep saying it's coming close, but other than that, we don't have any more information.
Let me just follow up. So, Kent, is that of just the tow or is that of the whole street department?
That is strictly tow.
So I'll wait for the street department to ask if the other audits have come in from the state on the rest of the street department.
Well, he's right here. So he's the street commissioner.
I didn't know if you wanted to wait until you got.
No, you can ask him if you're asking questions.
Okay. Kent, so all the different functions of the street department, has that all come in from the state auditor? I haven't seen it, that's why
I haven't heard anything about any other state audit of the rest of the street department, only tow.
I mean, so I know we funded and paid for a audit of the whole city and all of its different departments. You know, in fact, I think the third payment was this year. We paid it over 3 years.
Yeah, I believe at one point we submitted like our table of organization and some other small personnel type stuff to them. Other than that, I haven't heard anything else.
Okay. That's something maybe we should follow up on because I know that they were or did. So, okay, well, that was really all my questions.
Okay. All right. Alderwoman Boyd.
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you for the thorough questions, and a lot of the members had asked the questions I was going to ask. The only thing I wanted to, if I could say, is that I understand that we have the challenge with staffing, and I understand it's a countrywide issue, but I just think we need to look at, and the toll is really, to me, I guess my question would be, are we trying to ensure that people are properly trained before they're in these positions? Because that's what I keep hearing, you know, that I don't think this guy was trained properly to know the protocols and procedures, and then what follow-up was done. And I know the audit, the comptroller's office wouldn't do it, but I guess it would be for streets. Did you all follow up to kind of look at, make sure people are trained in regards to the processes?
We have since then. Originally, I mean, Steve had only been with us approximately 8 or 9 months at this point. This holiday issue obviously doesn't come up every day. It was probably, what, 7 or 8 times at that point. And as I mentioned in my response, that we will do our best to abide by the 2 regulations that actually have influence on the way holidays are paid. I don't necessarily agree with some of the things the auditor stated because I cannot find them wrote down anywhere. But as far as the compensation plan and AR 134, Steve and I have now went through that several times, and we are paying employees correctly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alderwoman Schweitzer, you're still here. I thought you were going to be gone. Do you have any questions at this point?
I guess I'm just interested in hearing the processes that have taken place to address some of these concerns.
Okay.
And what what the plans are to make sure that the concerns are addressed in the future, if there's another audit scheduled after some time has gone by. That's sort of where my mind's at right now.
So what, if that's the case, we're gonna let the street department kind of reply to some of the things.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm at this point, I just like to hear their side of the story as well.
And Alderwoman Peel, P-E-E-L. Are you still there? Okay, she's gone. All right, then. I thank you, auditors. I'd like you to stay in case we have some clarification. Mr. Flake, Director Williams, Mr. Flake, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Young are all here. Is there anybody in particular who wants to start off? Do you have replies? Do you want us to ask questions, or would you like to just make a statement about what you've heard so far? Because it's okay with me either way.
I'll make a quick statement. Most of everything that our response is actually wrote down as management responses. So it's very short. As we said, as our management response, the number 2, that we are going to change our methods and employ the compensation ordinance 71099, section 16, part D, as it pertains to those employees, and we're going to use 134 or administrative regulation 134 as it also provides to the same employees. One thing that's not noted in here is there are 2 types of employees we're talking about. We're talking about employees who are working on a holiday versus
I'm sorry, you said 2 types of employees?
Yep. Those who are working on a holiday, which is a majority of the tow lot, versus those who are not working on a holiday. There are 2 different ways to pay those employees. We were paying all of them with compensation or pay. We were not giving them compensatory time. We were actually doing that for a reason, but that reason is against the compensation plan. So we have stopped doing that. So if you are not working today, you're not scheduled to work today, then you will receive compensatory time. If you are working today, you are going to get paid per the compensation plan.
Okay, so 2 types of employees working. So the ones, what you're saying is there are some that are scheduled to work and are on the schedule and you're supposed to come in. And the other could be somebody that's not scheduled to work, but somebody didn't show up and then they had to come in?
No,
What's
they're not scheduled and not work.
Also not scheduled?
Not work is the second type.
Okay, so, and how do you pay them?
They currently, they were getting paid for the holiday and pay. Now they are getting paid for the holiday and compensatory time.
Okay, so if it's Christmas and you're not working, you would get compensatory time for Christmas, right?
That is correct.
If it's Christmas and you are working, you would get a per the regs. You get paid per the regs.
If you, per the reg, compensation for the holiday shall be in the amount proportionate to the number of hours an employee is regularly scheduled to work in a day or shift.
Okay, so if you were working 8 hours on Christmas, then you would get 8 hours of comp. Is that what you're saying?
No, you would get 8 hours of pay, and then you would get another 8 hours of pay because you worked any part of a holiday.
So you would get 16 hours of pay.
That is correct.
And no comp time.
That is correct.
Mr. Bell, is that your understanding of how it should work? Are you still here? Or Mr. Hassan?
Alderwoman Tyus, the way it should work is that if you are not scheduled to work that day, then you receive that day off with pay, which is what he's saying, 8 hours of time. is time that you paid for that you didn't work. So that's what I take as compensatory time. If you are working that day and it is a holiday, you will be paid for your 8 hours that you worked. In addition, you will receive 8 hours of compensatory time, but then you will also receive pay, actual pay of 4 hours at an overtime rate.
Okay, so here he said 8 hours pay, 8 hours. As I understood what you were saying, Mr. Flake, that 8 hours of pay and then 8 hours of more of pay, which would be 16 hours of pay. And I'm hearing Mr. Bell say something a little different.
And that's where our disagreement is per ordinance 71099.
I'm sorry, per what? What is it, Mr. Flake?
Per the ordinance 71099, which is the city's compensation plan, section 16, part D, it states, any employees required to work on a holiday shall be entitled to compensation for the holiday and hours actually worked.
So if you worked 8 hours, you get that. And you're saying there also compensation, you understand it to be, you get another 8 hours of, because it was a holiday, because you get paid for Christmas.
That is correct.
And there's no 4 hours of comp time that you would take off the way you understand it.
I have looked through every ordinance, every admin ring, and as it states in my management response, I cannot find anything that resembles the paragraph that was quoted in the audit response.
Okay, just a minute. So since you all have a difference of agreement, have you all ever sought the city councilor's opinion on this?
I have not.
Okay, and then I see here that Mr. Eric Bates weighs in. And when was this email? March 9th, 2021, and seems to be taking the position of the auditors. Have you seen this email that Mr. Bates sent to Mr. Hassan?
If I have, I don't recall.
Okay, we actually have it on our Google Docs, but I'm gonna have Madam Clerk. I'm sorry, Mr. Flake, do you have access to our Google Doc at all?
I don't believe so.
Madam Clerk, can we email that over to Mr. Flake?
Absolutely.
Okay. And because you would have to read it over, I'm not going to go over it right now, but if you get a chance, I want you to look at that because is it your understanding, since it's a personnel reg, that personnel would be or the city council would be in the best position to determine which is the correct manner?
As far as the admin rig, yes. As far as the ordinance / compensation plan, probably not.
So you would say even the city councilor wouldn't be in a better position?
Well, I'm in personnel as far as the admin rig.
And that's what I said, personnel / city
argument.
councilor, because I'm saying both of them, depending on what it is.
Yes.
Right. And so, okay. So you have a difference. Mr. Bell, you had a follow-up? I'm going to send a teenager over to your office because they can unmute. Okay, Mr. Bell.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I do apologize.
I'm going to send my 13-year-old niece over to your office. Okay.
Okay. God bless you.
Computer.
God bless you. Because the Department of Personnel, we consider them to be the process owner of all personnel regulations, inclusive of looking at what is included in a pay ordinance. So we would take their information and take it as a very reliable source as to how to apply a procedure. And we did this as part of our due diligence to really ensure that first we understood how it should be applied, what should be done, and what is currently being done. And we discussed this with them very in detail. So we had the confidence that they're the ones who administer the personnel policy and procedures. And therefore, we took confidence in their process. And no, we would not pursue a legal advice at that point.
Okay, and I used to be the chair of public employees and actually sponsored a pay ordinance. And as I had never been on public employees, I spent an inordinate amount of time with the personnel director and his staff going over the plan, because I don't sponsor anything that I haven't read. It was a very large pay ordinance. It's the one a few years ago where the police got a $6,000 across the board bonus. And so I will have to say, Mr. Flake, I kind of agree. I do agree with Mr. Bell in the Office of the Comptroller and Audit Division, because even though it's a pay ordinance, it is put together and put out there by the personnel director and his staff. So it is put into the form of an ordinance, but they are the ones that put it together. They are the one that sponsor it. They write all the things. And so I'm going to have to agree with them mostly, but the lawyer inside of me says that sometimes people make mistakes. And that's why I also want to just say that maybe mostly, I would say 95% personnel, but I would give that 5% legal interpretation in case somebody didn't write it right or wasn't put in the ordinance right. But I do agree with Mr. Bell that, and I know for a fact because I sponsored the ordinance myself. And as I said, I spent a lot of hours with the personnel director because I was not familiar with that. And we would meet at 3 hours at a time until I knew that pay ordinance backwards and forwards. So I always want to thank Mr. Richard Franks and Linda Thomas, because they spent a lot of times, and other members of the staff of personnel, they spent a lot of time so that I would be very familiar and could answer questions. I always assumed that somebody like me is going to ask me questions. So I never want to be on the floor without knowing the answer if I can. So I just saying to you, Mr. Flake, I think that the people are correct about the ordinance. I know that the ordinance originates from personnel. So that is something I think that we are going to have to get worked out definitively, even if the board has to step in and define who interprets the bill. And the chair of public employees is my vice president, Mr. Brandon Bosley, and I am the vice president of public employees.
Vice Chair.
And so I want us to, we're going to work on this, because this back and forth of, well, I don't think it's right, or I don't think that's the right interpretation, is not good for the city for me. Okay, we need to get to a final determination. And even if you disagree, if this is what personnel is saying, and we can ask city council, because I don't have a problem bringing both of them in there, then we follow one procedure or another. I'll say, so that we make sure. And if we have a mistake in the ordinance, or it's not what, because sometimes people write ordinances and it's not what they intended. They leave a word out and it's something different. I always think about President Clinton saying, depending on what the meant, and everybody laughed. But if you are an attorney, where the word the is placed could change the meaning. So we need to get to an agreement on that, so that we'll make sure we're doing it the correct way. Okay, so let's move on, Mr. Flake. So did you have any more statements? Because I do have a few questions for you.
Yep. The only other thing I just found a copy of Admin Reg 134, which states the exact same thing as the compensation plan, as far as the hours worked and compensation for the holiday.
Okay.
States the exact same thing as the compensation plan does. I mean, other than that, I mean, we have no issue. As soon as we were told that employees that were not working today were supposed to receive CT, they've received CT. I mean, it sounded like for an hour and a half that we have been going against everything all the time on purpose, which is not true. I mean, we've been going through audits for a long time at City Tow. And every time we hear something, we address it. To me, this question here yes, maybe somebody else had a different take on it, but as far as I know, I have not received that. And at the end of the day, we have no problem switching to whatever it says. And we're actually a very by the book organization, even though a lot of people don't necessarily believe that. And for opportunity 2, that's pretty much all I really have to say. Opportunity 1 with the time cards, leave slips not being signed. Since Steve's taken over, that's always, I'm not gonna say always done, but 99% of the time is done. Sometimes an employee calls in sick, so we don't necessarily get the employee signature at that moment, but we will get that at a later moment, whenever the employee returns. But I mean, I really think, as far as I'm concerned here, is that we've been very compliant. Any other thing I would like to bring up is I question the $50,000 loss. I think my answer down here on the bottom of the opportunities or management responses pretty much what sums that up. But whether we're giving an employee 8 hours of or 8 hours of CT or 8 hours of pay, we're still giving them 8 hours of CT or 8 hours of pay, which in my opinion is a zero net loss or gain. I think it's more administrative which way we're doing it, and if we're following the policy.
Okay. First of all, I do believe I heard Mr. Bell say that there was no nefarious intent. I think when Alderman Boyd was talking to him about that, I think that I wrote it down that he did that because that was important to me, that he didn't ascertain that you all had a negative reason to doing that or something that was illegal, that there were some disagreements. Okay. So I know sometimes when you and I've been listening to these reports about the tow lot for a lot of years, okay, too. So, so I know sometimes that can be a bit much because people are impugning your reputation. But I don't think that that's what I heard from them. I heard that they actually have a disagreement about how things should be done. And don't feel, and when I asked the question, it was to figure out how do we come to an agreement? What do we do? I think that's what the other one from the 13th, the 13th was saying. So what do we do? Okay, here we have this thing and you say, I don't agree, it's this way. How do we actually fix that so that we're all on the same page? It's not good to have an auditor saying that one branch of our government is not doing things the right way. And then over years, it hasn't been fixed. You know, when they were saying we need a manual for operating procedures, that's not good. So I would have liked to see for you say, hey, we are trying to get this thing done. We don't have enough people. You want us to do this? Okay, we can do it. Mayor Cruzen, get us some more people or personnel, come over and help us do that. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So it's like I said, I said before, I understand sometimes when you're operating with a short amount of people, you do everything that you have to do. And so some things fall through the cracks. Okay. And it's not intentional. It's that if you want me to tow all these cars and we got all our people out there towing, then it may not be exactly how you want, but we want to make sure you have enough staff so that that doesn't happen anymore. And we want for everybody to be on the same page. Okay, so I've not heard anybody say, oh, they're doing that intentionally. That's been before us so far. I am not going to tell you that I have not heard from some people who have contacted me that it's something different. But the people here, the auditors that do the books have not said that to me. Okay. Okay. So, I'm looking at the management does not agree with the observation about how things should be done on page 6. So what is your thoughts about when you don't agree with the auditor, what if anything should be done to reconcile those two differences?
Well, I think this came up last week. We received a notice of an exit interview. We are told to be at some place at a time for our exit interview, and we have to provide responses typically in less than 7 days. I think these were actually quicker than that. As I mentioned last week, I would really like to see that instead of going straight to these management responses, we actually have a time for clarity, and we actually have a week or 2 weeks to sit down. And that would have been a very good time where we could have talked to personnel and or the city councilors about this observation number 2. Instead of, like I said, we receive an agenda, we have an exit meeting where they essentially read what we have here in front of us back to us, and we're told to give a response. After that, we never hear another word. And that's the end of the story. And I would really like, as it was with the other one, where we were actually talking about specific tow tickets or this or that, I really think there's a point there where you could actually gain some clarity.
And has it ever been offered to you that you could have got help from the city councilors and or the personnel department or something, especially with writing a procedure manual? Sometimes you know kind of the steps, but actually putting a manual and writing it together the way that I think people would expect a procedure manual. Has there been any offer of help, or were you under the impression that you could have asked for help for that kind of thing?
With that, I did work with personnel. And I think there's a couple of things I actually worked with city councilors on, but not a majority of it. But yeah, as far as the audit's concerned, in general, it's like I said, it's us and city audit. And as far as other things, yeah, we're very good at reaching out to city councilors. I probably talk to them at least every other day about this, that, or something else. Or I reach out to the union, which we deal with the tow lot union a lot. Just to make sure things are clear between us and the union and the union employees that we have.
And when you say you're reaching out to the union, I see both Mr. Bell and Mr. Fletcher. Are you saying that, because I know the unions have some, what do you call the agreements with personnel about their scope of work? Is that when you're reaching out to them to make sure you're working within that agreement, or is that something else that you're reaching out to the unions about?
I mentioned this last week that, when we were putting the work rules together, they were passed back and forth between me and their rep several times on that. We contact each other anytime, something comes up, or maybe a disciplinary action or this, that, or something, anything really. Just try to keep that door open between us and the union in order to, at the end of the day, we all just kind of want to go about our own business. And whether it be an employee issue or a management issue with an employee or any of these work rules, it's came up about number of work hours in a day and how do we get around that? And not actual number of work hours, but since we're so short staffed, working employees 12, 16 hours in a day, which nobody at City Tow is a fan of, but in order to have people on the street and to have coverage, sometimes we have to do that. So those are the kind of conversations that the union rep and myself talk about, trying to figure out a way to resolve them.
And do you have a legal person from the city councilors assigned to you?
No.
So you just call over there and whoever they assign, because sometimes, like I know the Board of Adjustment has somebody assigned, so the street department doesn't have anybody that works with them particularly.
No, I usually call, I won't use a name, but one of the managers over there. And depending on what it is, he will point me in the right direction on who I need to talk to, or he'll send an email to get it out, and then that person will in turn contact me.
Okay, so I find that interesting. You work with the unions, you work with the legal department, but you really haven't worked that much with personnel and or the audit department, is what I understand, right?
Excuse me, I do work with personnel.
Oh, you do work with personnel.
Mostly on personnel issues, not rule issues.
Okay. Not rule issues, just personnel. Okay. And what I heard you also say, I want to make sure I understood you right, is that you would have liked that, in your opinion, that some of these things could have been worked out if you had had a sit down with the audit and been able to work them out, versus because you feel like you just get the audit report and only thing you had is 7 days to reply to whatever they said, and not any time where you guys could have worked it out.
Yep, I mean, I think this is a perfect example right here, that this entire number 2 in this audit, I mean, if someone would have actually told me, and I probably would have challenged it, if personnel told me this means this, I know me, I probably would have taken it to city councilors after that, because this is what the ordinance says and this is what the administrative regulation says. And to me, if you're going to be compensated for a holiday and compensated for your time worked, to me, there's no gray area there. So I would have taken it to the city councilors.
Okay, now I think that, and just speaking, I'm gonna let them speak for themselves, but I think last week they said they disagreed with you, that there was time for you to sit down with them, but I'm gonna let them respond themselves. Mr. Bell.
Alderwoman Tyus, our process, we discuss all observations, all the results of test work, doing field work, and when we close field work, we discuss items throughout the process. Now, we deal with directly the process owner, which was the administrative assistant too at that point. Because of people's respect for their time, the exit conference is where we will have the director, commissioner, and those people, invite them to that meeting. The 7 working days, it allows them not only to provide a management response, but if they have any information that they want to submit that we can review, look at, and assess to determine if the observation needs to be revised or either removed from the report, they have that opportunity to do that as well. Now, if this is information already coming from the payroll records, I would conject that it would not take long to give me any supporting documentation that you want or you feel you have that could cause that observation to be removed or revised. But even if you submit it with your response, you can submit it with your response and we could look at it and see if we need to revise the observation. But no information was provided to us to either look at that opportunity.
And I'll ask you again, did you let them know that that was available to them? And if you did, how did you let them know?
We expressed that as part of the agenda, that you have 7 working days. Within 7 working days, if you can provide us any additional information that we can look at to reconsider this observation, either removing it or revising it, or you can provide a management response. That is part of the agenda in all of our exit conferences.
And is it written
of what
or
type
verbal?
of review we are. It is verbal, but it is documented in the agenda.
Okay, verbal and documented.
And I think this was the same response that came up with the last type of audit, which was the operational audit. And so I digress a little bit and I say this again, that we stand behind our report and we would stand behind our audit process, that we do allow a due process to take place.
So let me ask you this, since you make it verbal, and so, and then I'll get you, Mr. Fletcher, since you make it verbal, I am a love of, sign this document right here. Do you understand?
I've gathered that.
Oh, next week, I'm gonna bring you all the different forms that I have created over 30 years.
Okay.
So what would be wrong with having a document that they signed that said, do you understand that it is your right to do just what you said, to submit more documents or to change so that we could change the recommendations to give us additional things? What, in that way, they couldn't be coming back here saying, I didn't know, because you would have somebody, John Doe.
Well, Alderwoman Tyus, I do understand what you're saying. However, we're not working within, I guess, looking at to point a finger at later down the
But
line.
I don't think that's pointing a finger. I
So-
think
so
that's so.
we- Okay.
I
we just
disagree
come
with
from.
that. That's pointing a finger. That's so
Okay.
we wouldn't have this conversation that we're having right now, where people say, "Yes, I told you." No, I did not tell you. Okay. I think it's and I'm going to tell you again. So I'm the kind of person, when we run campaigns, if my husband goes out and buys donuts, if he forgets the receipt, I'll say, "You got to write up a receipt and sign it," because I want to make sure when I turn it into Missouri Ethics Commission that we are fully documented. So since you do such a good job, I don't understand the reluctance to take one more step. And it's not, to me, I don't find that to try to entrap people. I find that as a way to, so we don't have this conversation anymore.
Well, I will say at this point, it's very well duly noted, and we will take that under advisement.
Thank you. That's a very political answer. Yes, Mr. Fletcher.
I just want to back up a little bit. I just want to be clear. The 7 days is not a requirement. It is more of, we have to get something on the calendar. We have a large audit plan for the year with a short staff. So I think anybody would agree that when you're dealing with project management, which we could be up to 100 audits in a year with only 5-6 auditors at any given time, depending on our staffing, that we have to set deadlines. Now, those deadlines are not so firm that if a department asked for additional time, that we would, of course, give that time. I am going to ask Leonard and the rest of the staff, like he said, under advisement, maybe we can start giving 14 days. But we have to make sure that the audit work is done. But again, the 7 days is more of something to get on the calendar. Hey, can you guys think you can get this within the next 7 business days? And if they say no, I need to know, but I'm under no impression that anybody has ever denied that. And no one in our department, I have been very clear that no one should ever deny additional time if needed, as long as the departments are cooperating. We have had some departments that refuse to give management responses, and we wait 3, 4, 5 weeks, and then eventually we just have to issue the report with no management responses at all. So again, I really do understand Mr. Flake, and I don't want him to ever feel like that it was rushed. We will consider this in our staff meetings going forward. Just know that it is not being rushed, and we will do better next time to convey that if the 7 days is not doable, then just give us a reasonable amount of time and we will work with you. We really do try our best, and we're going to do better next time to make sure that everyone understands that we are here to serve the city, and whatever you need to get your stuff together so that we can pull together and have the best recommendations, we will do that. So we will do that going forward.
Well, I haven't zeroed in on the 7 days so much as this, the understanding that they could submit additional information. And it may be because sometimes when people do a job so much, they think that that's understood. Why don't you understand? I've said that this phone is black, and you can prove to me that this phone is not black, that it's orange. So you may take it for granted because you do it so much that they know that they can submit more things. And I would even go with Mr. Bell saying that they tell them that, but now I'm hearing Mr. Flake say he didn't quite maybe understand that he could. So I'm having that, you don't have to put your hand up, Mr. Fletcher, we're having this conversation. Yeah. So why wouldn't we then just give them something in writing saying you have this right, and have them sign it so they can't say, oh, I didn't know that. That's the only thing I'm asking a question. And maybe you could help me, because Mr. Bell gave me a political answer.
We don't ask them to attest whether or not, if you're asking to attest whether or not they've given us information.
No, that they understand they can give you additional information.
Oh, so, well, I think it's a common assumption that if we're under audit and that the report, yeah, I just would think, yeah. I mean,
I understand because you're doing the job, so you assume that. The police chief and I had a conversation about warrants and going to people's houses. And when I argued the other side, he said, well, I've always been the police doing it a certain way. So a lot of times when you do a job, you assume, and we're going to use this word common sense, which I have since found is not so common sometimes, depending on which side you're on. So we're assuming that they understand they could submit something. You're even thinking, well, we told them that, but
Well, we
That
also
don't mean they understand it. So something that would be in writing saying you know, within this certain time frame or within a time frame, you can give us more information to, as Mr. Bell said, remove the our recommendation or change it or something. So
well,
I'm just asking why you wouldn't put it in writing and have them sign it saying they understand that.
well, I guess to start, our opening letter puts it in writing that they are to
Okay.
provide the information that's being requested. So we put it
Okay.
in writing that is to be provided. So if you respond to the opening letter, then it is, we can presume, not assume, but presume that you read the opening letter, because the opening letter specifically says provide the information that's requested. In addition, throughout the audit, and the tow lot was no different, we work hand in hand with the sections and the departments that we audit. So throughout the entire process, this wasn't a 7 days you have to explain. This was, you have 4, 5, 6 weeks, however long the audit takes, as we ask questions for you guys to pull stuff together and work with us as we gather information. So the audit is not done in a silo back at the internal audit section, but rather before COVID, it was done in the field, in the audit, in the department's actual desk and working areas. So we make it a point to be in the field. So, you know, we work hand in hand with the departments, and they should be not surprised at the end of the audit when the audit report comes out regarding the material of the audit report. They should not be surprised. Now, if they are, then, you know, there is an issue, but I am under no impression, again, that the audit staff and audit manager are not providing the departments throughout the audit kind of where we're at and where we're heading throughout the audit. That is supposed to be happening. We do it on a routine basis. We're in their departments. We're asking questions. We're telling them why we're asking the questions. We don't come in and say, we're not going to tell you why we're asking. Here's why. So yeah, all that is happening, including the opening letter, which requests and requires them to provide the information.
And who is the opening letter? Who would have been sent to? Mr. Flake, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Young? Do you know?
Well, this specific one would have gone, usually it goes to the head of the department. So I'm guessing this one went to Mr. Flake, my guess is, but Mr. Bell or Mr. Hassan could clarify that.
Mr. Bell, Mr. Hassan?
I think that would have been addressed to Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Wilson, okay.
Okay, because he's the director, so then it would have been incumbent upon him to then make sure that the people under him knew what the scope was and what could and could not be done.
Absolutely.
Okay. And herein, I see the problem. We used to play a game when I was in grade school where we would start at one end of the line and tell something to people. And by the time you got to 4 or 5 or 7 people at the other end of the line, it would be a very different thing. So this may be some of the problem, but I understand that you would be sending it to the director. Yes, sir, Mr. Fletcher.
And I just want to be, it is, internal audit strives to add value to the operations of the city. So going forward, there is no disagreement between us and Mr. Flake. We will take into consideration, we will, if we can, making sure we get all of our work done, we will add more time to the preferred response date. I will also make sure that everybody in the department is forthcoming with information throughout the audit. So all the weeks we spend with them, they understand everything that we're doing, why we're doing it, so that at the end of the audit, that it is not a surprise. So I am in no way disagreeing with Mr. Flake, but rather trying to shed light and then also assure you that going forward, we will make sure that the departments understand where we're coming from, what we're looking for, and how they can best help us get there.
And that they understand, then you can reply to us and change it, right?
Yes,
Right.
That will also be in there, yes.
Right. And let me say this, I love auditors. So I think that's the best thing since sugar. I like accounting procedures. I'm the person that reconciles my statements to the penny. Okay, every month I'm sitting down there, and if it's a penny off, I'm spending several hours finding that penny. My husband is rolling his eyes and like, oh my God, it's 50 cents, round it up. I can't do that. So I appreciate what you do. Okay, I am that crazy person. Okay. So now I know Mr. Wilson may have gotten the letter. Anything else from you, Mr. Flake? Anything else that you want to discuss?
Yeah, I do have 2 things. I just received the copy of the email from personnel to audit and had a chance to at least quickly look over it. It appears that only includes employees who did not work on the day in question or on the holiday. It does not appear to address employees who worked on a holiday.
Because it
and I
says
believe
employees regularly scheduled day off, right?
that is correct. And that's not my argument. I have agreed that that is what everything says.
Okay.
I argue about employees that work on a holiday.
Okay, but you're saying so that there's two different occasions and this only covers one.
That is correct. And we weren't disputing that to begin with. And I don't recall receiving an email copy of this at any point. And that's once again one of my issues, that if this was an argued matter, I would have thought, and maybe I did receive it, but I don't see it in my inbox after searching, that would have been passed along to the appointing authority and or the director.
Okay, Mr. Bell, did you just hear what he said? And I'm reading what he says right here. He's saying he doesn't dispute the regular scheduled day off. That does not work. His dispute is with how do you pay people who are scheduled to work and work. Mr. Hassan.
Mr. Pepper, I want to remember the employee that we are involved in this, if they are regular employee that work on that day or on the holiday. I try to remember what they have. Melon.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm referring to Melon to provide more information on this.
You gonna refer it over to Mr. Pepper?
Yes, because.
Okay, Mr. Pepper. So that's fine. So I'm reading what the email that we got, and it does just refer to the employee whose regular scheduled day off is, and he's agreeing with you with that. He's saying that it is different when the person actually works, and that's why he pays them differently.
You are paid. You are paid differently, but how they calculated was incorrect. And now I think that's the whole issue about how you calculate the overtime, the comp time. That's where the issue lies, for people who work on those holidays. Instead of them getting straight, you're supposed to get 8 and 4, not 8 and 8. And I think that's where probably the confusion may come in at reading the ordinance or the section. It should state how you get 8 and 4.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand this. So if I do not work for Christmas, I still get paid 8 hours.
Correct.
And that's it.
Yes.
If I work Christmas, so I get paid 8 hours for working, because I'm already working.
Mm-hmm.
Plus or minus the shift differential, because if I'm working second shift, it's different than a third shift than first shift. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then on top of that, you're saying I only get 4 hours of compensatory time versus 8 hours, since I was supposed to get paid for Christmas. Is that what you're saying?
You get paid your 8 hours for your compensatory, and you get your 4 for your overtime.
So then I'm getting cheated, because I worked, so of course I already get paid, but I only get 4 hours of compensatory time, whereas the person who didn't work gets 8 hours. I'm gonna be mad.
Point of clarity, Alderwoman Tyus.
Okay.
The issue is not with an employee that is off that day and receives the compensatory time.
No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the person that worked.
The issue is the person that works.
Right.
And that person that works, that is scheduled to work that day, that is a holiday,
Mm-hmm.
they get paid their 8 hours that they work.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get 8 hours of compensatory time. And then they get another 4 hours paid straight out to them at the overtime rate.
Okay, so you get 8 hours which you're paid, 4 hours of 8 hours of compensatory time, and then another 4 hours.
Yes.
So you really get 12 hours of compensatory time.
Well, we're going with this regulation. Yes, you would get something like that, because you're going to get that because of the way that department is organized. They're on rotating shifts, so the shift differential comes into play. So they would get that. But the question comes into you submitting the 8 hours of compensatory time as overtime, when only 4 hours should have been submitted as overtime and not a total of 12 hours.
Okay, and I'm hearing you. So 8 hours. So I worked 8 hours, I get paid. I get 8 hours that I get to take off when I want to, all in one day, or I can take off an hour every day or 2 hours every day.
However you want to do that. Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And so then that would be for the pay that other people got because they didn't work. Okay, right?
Correct.
Okay, then I get 4 hours of overtime.
4 hours of overtime paid directly out to you.
And is that time and a half? Or what is those 4 hours?
That's time that's paid. It says, and the remaining 4 hours is paid at the regular rate. And because they are already on a shift differential pay period, they're going to get a 1.5 time rate.
So they get 1.5 time. So, okay, now I'm getting you.
Now, I just want to clarify that I heard in Mr. Flake's response in this hearing that they had made the adjustment in their process to comply with the regulation and the ordinance. So that's what I heard.
I heard that he had done it for people who did not work. I did not hear he did it for the people who work. I heard that he said he disagreed with you. Is that right, Mr. Flake?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I think at this point we have this from Eric Bates, from the personnel.
But he only speaks to the people who regularly scheduled day off. He does not speak to the people who worked. It is not in this email. So I think we need to get further clarification.
Well, we can do that, but we go by what the ordinance specifically states on that. And our point of position was that if the person worked that day, they were going to get the 8 hours, but then this 12 hours is supposed to come back in a split. It wasn't supposed to come back as a total 16 hours of overtime pay.
But when I read this, it says, and I want to, it says, except as otherwise provided in this section, when a city holiday falls on an employee's regularly scheduled day off. So to me, that's only going to the employee that is regularly scheduled off. It does not address the employee who is not regularly scheduled off, okay? And that's where I hear your differences. Is that right, Mr. Flake?
That is correct. And I would like to ask one question. Wait
a minute, let me finish. Well, let me finish. The employee shall be entitled to have compensatory time added to his or her balance. So in no place in this reg does it address employees who have to work, because there are two classes of employees: those who are regularly scheduled off for Christmas and those who have to work for Christmas. And so this reg cannot cover both of them.
No, it cannot cover both of them. And I think Mr. Pepper clearly stated in his review that his observation came to those who were off and how it was computed for those that were off.
So his observation is only for those that are off, not for those who worked.
Mr. Pepper, will you? Mr. Pepper, will you respond to that?
I'm going to give you a classification as an audit person and reduce your pay if you keep doing my job. And I promise you, you like your money more than mine, okay? Okay, Mr. Pepper. Mr. Pepper, can you respond?
I think the clarification is really relating to the people that work, because you working, you getting comp time and you getting overtime pay. We already know that if you don't work, you're going to get paid for that holiday. That's just, governing by, the city holiday, policy and procedure that you get your 8 hours on a holiday if you don't work. A lot of this stems from people that works on that day and how it was computed and given more than normal, than what the regulation states. So I don't know if that was a confusion, and, as far as giving ample time, you should know that, how it's supposed to be paid. That's how I look at it. And that's how, it's kind of stated for as an example.
Okay, again, so does your report, I want to understand this, cover those who worked or those who did not work?
Work. It says
Okay.
Employees that worked.
And
And if you look
where's
at,
that? Can you refer me to what page that is?
If you look at page 6, where it says example at the top, employees
Okay.
that work 40 hours, we gave an example.
Yes, right.
It said employees therefore has worked 48 hours is due to 12 hours at the 8 and a time and a half. 8 hours is compensatory time and the remaining 4 is the overtime hours.
And where do you get that? That's what I think the whole gist of it. Where are you getting that regulation and or rule from? Because it does not say it from the personnel director, because they say they're referring to only those people who are scheduled to be off. Where do you get that reg from?
On a clarity, in the report, he cited.
Wait.
Under the section where it says 16D paragraph 2.
16D paragraph 2.
Where it says
refers
exception
to-
otherwise provided in this section where the city holiday falls on an employee's regularly scheduled day off, the employee shall be entitled compensatory time added to his or her balance in amount appropriate to the number of hours regularly scheduled in a day or a shift.
So you're reading that to say it's regularly scheduled off, but they worked anyway. Because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. Because what I read it is, this applies to how you pay people who are scheduled off. And I think that's how Mr. Flake has read. And that is what has been his contention.
Mhm. Let me research a few minutes and I can pull it up.
Okay, well, are you doing that, Mr. Bell?
Hold on here. Okay, I'm not muted. Okay. I want to make sure I wasn't muted.
Okay.
I pulled up the regulation that he cited in there, which is regulation 134. And where the change in position comes is because you're dealing with a department that has rotating schedules. So if I
You
go
have
to
regulation 134, I want to look at it myself. I'm sorry, I can't follow along without, that's why I always have things. It's under the I can Google St. Louis City Reg 134 or go online and get it, can I?
Yeah, you can go online and get it.
If you hold on just a second, I want to have it before me. And it's a personnel reg, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you said it's 134, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay, work schedule documents, documentation of attendance. Okay, this is it right here. And which section are we looking at? Because it's got 7 sections.
Okay, we're looking at, first we're going to the section with differential assignment pay. And then first it talks about work schedules, but then you go into the issue where you have shift differentials, which is going into D.
Okay, so the work schedules start with 1.
C. That
So,
starts with,
okay, C, work schedules, okay.
yeah, that starts with C. Okay, then C tells you about work schedules. Then you go into D, which
Okay.
goes to differential assignment pay, which then also tells you about weekend differential, and then what constitutes overtime for city employees.
Okay, so this is where you're getting how they should be paid when they worked.
Yes.
Okay, and I do believe you have a reference to this. I'm looking right at it. Administrative Reg 134.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I haven't read it, so I can't argue the point about this one, but.
No problem.
So Mr. Flake, have you had a chance to review Administrative Reg 134? Because it is in their that audit report.
Oh, I have, but what section are we talking about in particular?
C and D.
Yeah, because that's what I referenced in our management responses, but let me pull up C and D in particular.
So to me, this is maybe a point, because this is going to take a minute. We probably need to read these regs. And so I don't want to stay longer than we have to. So I'm going to ask you to go, maybe spend some time going over that, Mr. Flake, okay? And then maybe we'll talk about it later. Is that okay?
Yep, that's fine, but can I ask if there's
Sure.
anything in particular? Because I've reviewed all this as far as this matter is concerned, and I don't think there's anything in here of any
Mr.
different.
Mr. Bell, can you bring our attention to the specific paragraphs and or sentences that would be of importance to how this is calculated?
No, I would think that actually this was the basis for when we looked at how the overtime was to be determined. And then we took the ordinance to look at how overtime is computed when people are working or when their scheduled days are off. And we found out that pretty much our basis found out that they were not consistent, that they were giving people excessive pay when they didn't qualify for excessive pay. Now, what we can do, Alderwoman Tyus, we can revisit and talk back with personnel and see if there is maybe a further clarification needed.
Okay.
We are willing to do that.
Okay. I'm just looking at that because it seems like we do have kind of a difference here. And the letter that you got does just, it's just in regards to people who are employees who are scheduled off for that time. So,
and I think, although Mr. Pepper said work, I am moving toward that we were looking at when people were scheduled off and how they were, but we have to go back and look at their timesheets, and we have to go back to the actual documentation and see how we pulled that.
okay, but I'm gonna look at this reg myself because I just want to understand it also and see if there's anything in there. But I think I don't do well reading and trying to understand under these circumstances. I need to get someplace quiet and read it and highlight it and tear it apart. So
Understood.
and if I need to do that, I think that other people might need to do that also. So we're going to move along from that and say at this point, we might have an actual disagreement that can be settled if we do further investigation. Is that fair?
I would concur with that.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Flake?
Not at this time.
Anybody with you that want to say anything right now? Are we good?
I think we're all good.
Okay. Alderwoman Schweitzer, I want to go back to you because you had said you wanted to have some answers about how we were going to go forth. I think we've identified that maybe one of the problems right here, and that it's that there's some disagreement about how to calculate time. That maybe Mr. Flake may have made a good point, because I thought that the auditors made a good point until I read this really well, and it does only speak to the people who are scheduled off. So there are two different classifications of people. Did you have questions about other things that we've talked about?
No, and not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Peel. Okay. Alderwoman Boyd, do you have questions? Alderwoman Boyd, your mic is on, but okay.
I know, I'm sorry. I'm doing something. Don't you dare fuss, because I'm driving. So don't fuss at me.
I don't even want to hear that you're doing that. Take that back.
Right.
You have the right to remain silent. Okay, you are not.
I just got through dropping your husband off at the doctor. So
Okay,
no,
good.
I
And
have
he
no
wants
questions.
his
Thank
second
you.
wife to be safe, so do not be doing that. Okay, I'll pull
Yes,
over.
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I pulled over. No, ma'am. I have no more comment.
All right, I'm going reverse. Alderman Boyd, any further questions?
No, Madam Chair, no further questions. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Alderman Vacar had to go to another meeting. Alderman Bosley, any questions? He's gone. Is there anybody who has anything finally to say? If not, I am going to adjourn this meeting, but I do want to say that we need to get together and either individually, the audit department and the streets department, to iron out this wrinkle, because I think that would make a difference in your report if we do find that we've missed something. And I'm going to read it myself, and if I don't hear from you all in the next couple of days, I will reach out to you myself to see if we found some kind of common ground. Mr. Fletcher.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what you just said. We will take this time to go back through the audit report, all the information that was provided, as well as the ordinances and regulations. And we will work with Kent with this, Mr. Flake, and we will respond. We will inform you of what is, if there was an error made on the report, we will let you know.
Great. We all make mistakes because I call the vice president of the board the vice chair and vice versa. So I always do that just to keep myself in check. You know, a lot of things, Sharon Ties, but some things you forget, okay, and get confused. So we all do that sometimes. Any further input from anybody? I think I'm going to send the streets department, though, a legal I'm going to send you a bill for legal help. Okay. I don't know who pays it and I can't get paid because I can't get double pay, but we did good work today. I appreciate it. And so we'll be talking in the next couple of days, and we will be hopefully when we come back here next week, hopefully we will have permission. We're going to bring us a stenographer and some people who want to testify. And I did send you all a note about that. I wanted those people that don't work for the city to be under a stenographer, and we'll find out if the board gives us authority to that. And by that time, we will hopefully have this other matter cleared. And if somebody wants to come and just let us know, that'll be fine. But mostly we'll be doing testimony next week. Anything else anybody wants to bring before the committee? I'd entertain a motion that we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This meeting is adjourned. I'm sorry, Mr. Pepper, did you have your? Okay, all right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.